Hello, my name is Sean Castro, and today I will be giving a presentation on capital budgeting. Today's presentation is titled Capital Budgeting. I'm a master's student at American Military University attending the course BUSN604. The professor for this course is Professor Michael Aubrey. The objective today is to cover the listed topics here: review of capital budgeting, sensitivity analysis in regard to capital budgeting, qualitative and quantitative steps in sensitivity analysis, and of course we want to incorporate risk into our capital budgeting as well. In this PowerPoint presentation, we will be reviewing capital budgeting and sensitivity analysis in regards to capital budgeting. In addition, we will be discussing the qualitative and quantitative steps used in sensitivity analysis. Finally, we will be going over risk as it is incorporated in capital budgeting. Capital budgeting is also known as investment appraisal. It is the process a business undergoes through to evaluate all potential projects and investments. Construction of new locations or big investments in outside ventures are great examples of projects which would require capital budgeting analysis. A major part of capital budgeting analysis requires an analyst to assess a prospective project's lifetime cash inflows and outflows to determine whether the potential returns that would be generated meet a sufficient target based on the company's goals. There are specific methods of capital budgeting, and they include discounted cash flow, payback, and throughput analysis. Shareholders' value and profit is determined by the amount of money yielded and returned over a specific time period. We describe cash inflow as any income coming into a company. Examples of this would be interest from savings accounts, investments made by shareholders, loans from banks, and profits. Examples of cash outflow could be materials, cost of materials, dividends paid, mortgage and rent, taxes, fines, and miscellaneous costs. These are all examples of any income that is going out of the company. Next, we have the payback period. This is how long it takes to recover the initial cost put into a particular project or investment. Next, we have net present value. You can figure this number out by subtracting the present value of the initial capital from the present value of cash inflow over a specific time period. Next, we have the profitability index. This identifies the relationship between the cost and benefits of a proposed project through the use of ratio calculated as profitability index equals present value of future cash flow divided by the initial investment. In conclusion, the most important aspect of capital budgeting will come in the form of income statements, balance sheets, and cash flow statements. This slide discusses sensitivity analysis. As you can see in the example, you have variables that are input and you receive different output as the variables change. Sensitivity analysis is the process of understanding how different values of input variable affect the dependent output variable. Things like cost of goods, different prices, staff, and other changing numbers make up these variables. As you change one of the variables, the output from one of the constants change, giving you projections. The differences between quantitative and qualitative is that quantitative is number-based. It can be counted and measured. And qualitative is interpreted or can be descriptive. The following steps are qualitative and quantitative steps for sensitivity analysis. 1. We can test the sensitivity of cost elements to changes in estimating input values and key assumptions. By testing these numbers, this would be considered qualitative. Step 2 is identify effects on the overall estimate of changing the program schedule or quantities. Now, when you change quantities, this can be qualitative, but when you're identifying the effects, that could be quantitative, but when you identify the effects that take place from these changes, that can be qualitative. Number 3, we can determine which assumptions are key cost drivers and which cost elements are affected most by changes. Now, this also can be qualitative and quantitative. As said earlier, it's number-based and it also can be descriptive. If a small change in the value of a cost element, parameter, or assumption yields a large change in the overall cost estimate, the results are considered sensitive. Finally, we have risk. Risk is determined by many factors and is used in business. In business, risk is a word sometimes used interchangeably with leverage. Leverage can be determined by specific ratios. Leverage is defined as the amount of debt a company has in conjunction with their equity. The higher the debt, the higher the leverage is considered to be. The higher leverage equals higher debt. High debt equals high risk. Therefore, high leverage equals high risk. Many times a company will use borrowed money to grow for a number of reasons. This is a business strategy that is thought through thoroughly, and in the end, sensitivity analysis can help when determining reward from risk, and analysis can determine where the leverage comes into play. Looking at the pyramid in the figure on this slide, we see common equity, preferred equity, subordinated debt, and senior debt. Common equity is the total value of ownership invested into a company by its shareholders. Preferred equity is an equity investment that is considered superior in interest to common equity but subordinate to debt. Subordinate debt is a debt owed to an unsecured creditor that can only be paid in the event of a liquidation after the claims of secured creditors have been met. And finally, we have senior debt. Senior debts are loans secured by collateral that must be paid off before any other debts. Here, when you look in the figure, you can see as the pyramid goes up, the risk level changes. In conclusion, we have gone over sensitivity analysis, capital budgeting, qualitative and quantitative steps, and the risk associated in capital budgeting. On the final page, we have our references here used for our figures and for our information. Again, my name is Sean Castro, and thank you for viewing.